odd number. There's nobody sitting back yet. Everybody needs to move the chairs. That way I'm not standing in front of you the whole time. I feel like I'm blocking your view.
Brian didn't make you move.
Yeah. It'll be on the comment card, one way or the other. I couldn't see the screen when Brian was teaching or Vince's
Had to move.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So last week Brian ended this talking about how different money managers manage assets. When you think about trying to get public information, or if you're listening to the guys on Sundays, talking about investments, they'll tell you about indexing and allocation, and then you get the occasional guy that will start talking about individual securities. But having a plan and understanding what's going on in your portfolio. Long-term indexing has been the winner, right? But buy and hold, as Brian might have said, buy and hope right there on the strategic. Where you start to carve out different sequence of returns and how portfolios reacted to different times, I think that it's important to really understand or have an idea of what's going on here. When you have tactical management where somebody's going to be making moves in the portfolio in order to take advantage of opportunities or to move into a more defensive position, you would think that their goal is there for you to either maximize returns or minimize losses. In the top two here, these are what we call strategic, and we call these the sailing markets. The sailboat there, the sail is your investments, the wind is the market, and we know it can blow you front ways, back ways, sideways. Brian and I we were at a conference since yesterday down in Orlando, and they bring economists in there to talk to us and kind of give us their perspective on what's going to happen this year, where they think the economy is going to go, how they think they should be allocated moving forward. And typically we see guys from all four of these boxes in these conferences. These guys are the funnest guys to hang out with at the bar, because they'll stay out because they're going to get up and do the same exact thing they did the day before. The other guys are going to be looking at the market, they'll be doing research, they need to be focused on what's happening in the markets and where they may need to position their portfolios. So Brian give you the analogy about they may go on a cruise. Did he say that before? No. So the tactically unconstrained portfolios, we call those the rowing strategies. So their goal is really to minimize losses. Their goal is to miss the second 10% downturn. I can tell you some history from 2000 to 2008, managers that only lost maybe 10%, 7%, some of them actually made a couple bucks in 2008. But then when you look at the bull run since 2008 in the markets, a lot of them have underperformed the markets pretty significantly. When you think about these types of portfolios, they're probably only going to capture maybe 50 to 60% of the upside, but they're only going to capture maybe 30 to 40% of the downside as well. So they're a safety net. So the analogy typically, I usually end class 2, but everybody who's been on a cruise, what's the first thing they do once you get your free glass of champagne, find out where your cabin is?
Muster drill.
Muster drill, lifeboat drill. How are you going to get off of the boat in the event there's an event that causes it? How many of you remember the Titanic? I don't say anybody was on it, but what didn't they have? They didn't have a muster drill. They didn't have an exit strategy on how to get off. They had leftover lifeboats. They had leftover life preservers. Lifeboats were not filled. They weren't filled to capacity because nobody knew how to get people. Nobody thought anybody would ever have to get off of that boat. Think of these types of strategies as an exit strategy or a life preserver for a portion of your portfolio. We're going to talk about drawdown here in a couple seconds. So if you think about a portfolio where I would have only maybe lost 10 to 15% in a 30 or 40% downturning market, and I need to take money out of my portfolio, idealistically you want to have that money in cash in front of there, but it would have less of an effect on those types of portfolios as it would on the portfolios that are at the top. And he showed me that, right? The Vikings, they had both sailing and rowing. So hypothetical drawdown on a portfolio. If I have $1 million hypothetically in my portfolio. This isn't in the book, by the way. Market goes down 40%. I have what, 600,000. Market goes back up 40%. Am I back to even? No, right. $840,000. Compound that by taking withdrawals. If I have 40% downturn, I take 50,000 out. Portfolio balance 550,000. When it comes back, back to 770,000. Now, this is the one thing, you know, when people are in the accumulation phase and they're saving, this doesn't really come into play. People aren't really thinking about that. But the one thing that I always tell clients that they need to focus on is, what are you going to do this year? You know, and then it's like pulling teeth. Well, we might go on a vacation here, might do that. You know, are you going to give money to kids? Is there a home improvement project that you want to do? Well, if you're planning on taking $50,000 out of your portfolio this year, as an advisor, I want to know that, not because I'm going to tell you whether or not you should spend it or not, but I want to make sure I pull that $50,000 and set it over here in a cash bucket or a very, very conservative bucket, so that if the market does tank, I don't want to have 40% less of $50,000 that I was going to take out, right? And I can leave the rest of the portfolio in the market to recover when the market does come back. So, you know, looking at where we're at today, you know, this is, I think this wasn't updated for the end of the year yet, but I think this was as of the end of August of 2018. But this is the S&P 500, and this obviously this is not a W for, it was a W there for a while. Now we have all this over here, but this is not a W for winning. If we think about, you know, we hit an all-time high here in 2000, and then we had, you know, about the end of the first quarter, April, that's when the market started to go down. We had a cumulative downturn over a 3-year period of about 55% of the S&P 500. It then took us almost 7 years to get back to where we were in 2000. And then what happened? The bottom fell out. Then we lost it all in 1 year. And all in 6 months, practically. And then it took another 6 to 7 years for it to get back to where it was. And now here's where we're at today. So when you think about that, you know, we've been to the peak, right? We've been to the highest part of the mountain once before, and then we've gone back down to the bottom. You know, when you think about Mount Everest, you know, all the people that make their, that try to climb, get to the top of that, you know, only about 10% of those that actually, you know, try to do that get to the top. Of those that get to the top, how many of those do you think make it back down? Still only about 10%, because you have to have a plan to get to the top of the mountain, but you also have a plan to get off of the top of the mountain. So, you know, when you get up to here, and depending on where you're at in life and when you're going to need assets, you know, you got to think, well, maybe, you know, maybe I should think about diversifying my portfolio, doing some alternative types of investments to minimize some risk and also lock in some of that where I'm at today, so I can have more of a predictable outcome moving forward. So this is portfolio drawdown. We're using the Vanguard 500 Index Fund and the Vanguard Total Bond Index Fund. We're rebalancing quarterly, and we're taking 50,000 out a year adjusted for inflation. How many of you know somebody or have somebody in your family that's, you know, 90 or 100 years old? I do. My aunt's going to be 94. My grandmother passed away. She was 87 years ago. She still bowls. Her husband's 6 years older than her. He will be turning 100 soon. And he still plays golf and bowls as well. So, you know, when you think about retiring in your 60s, and we have, you know, an 18-year period, you know, if this was his portfolio and that was his need from assets, you know, he would be doing some hard thinking now about how long is that money going to last. Okay. So, having a plan on what you're going to do and how you're going to take money from your accounts is very important. So, does anybody have any questions on any of that? So, tax-deferred annuities. Now we are back to the book, and if you remember from class 1, we're in section 3, I believe, investments. many of you have heard of annuities? Anybody have an annuity? Has anybody heard that annuities are bad? Has anybody heard that annuities are good? What's the consensus? They're confusing is usually generally what everybody agrees upon is that, what are they? How do they work? One of the biggest questions I get when people are talking about annuities is, if I put my money in there, is it gone? Meaning, do I lose it? I mean, there's a purpose for it. It's going to provide a benefit for me, but does it disappear? Tax-deferred annuities, all annuities, number one, are tax-deferred. Okay. So why would I put an IRA into an annuity? Because it doesn't make sense. Why would I put that in there? If I already have a tax-deferred vehicle, why would I use a tax-deferred annuity in order to do that? Whatever, I'm going to talk about annuities, how they work here in a couple slides. But if somebody's proposing an annuity to you, there should be a reason why they're proposing an annuity to you. If they're proposing an annuity to you, they should be showing you multiple contracts, multiple insurance companies, and pointing out the differences, because they're all different. They all have their own niche on where their market is. Because if they all did the same thing, it'd be just picking your favorite color, right? So finding out which one works for you. If you're in your late 50s and are retiring now or retiring in a couple of years and you have the ability to invest in something like that, that one might be different from somebody that's 64, 65, retiring, this year, and what might be the right one for them. And it's all, based upon what those bells and whistles are in that annuity. But if you use non-qualified money, meaning after-tax money, it is tax deferred. You only pay taxes on any of the